15 seconds. Ten seconds.
My name is Sharon Brais. I have the pleasure of interviewing Marcia Smith today. Today is October 3rd, 2007. I'm conducting this interview as part of the Connecticut Bar Foundation James W. Cooper Fellows Oral History of Connecticut Women in the Legal Profession Project. This project is sponsored by the Connecticut Bar Foundation.
And my name is Marcia Smith. Excuse me. I'm 76 years old. I was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I'm a product of the Bridgeport Public Schools, where I grew up, class of 1949 of Bassick High School. After that, I went to UConn for a short time and loved history, just loved studying history. I must go back 1 minute and say that in high school, I had a teacher named Miss Cooney, who should go down in the annals of the greatest teachers because she turned us all on to studying history. She really did. She was fabulous. And so anyway, I went there, I went to UConn and had a wonderful history teacher, again, who said the place to study history was University of Pennsylvania. And so I went to the University of Pennsylvania to study history. And it was very hard on my parents because we were a very middle-class family. Being born in 1931, I was born in the Depression, and by 1949, though we were out of the Depression, still we weren't humming along. My father and all his family were pharmacists, and so there was always money for education, always money for education. And Penn was a big expense because it was $1,500 a year then for room, board, and tuition. So that was a great sacrifice for my family to send me there. But
They encourage you to do this.
oh yes. Because of having grown up in Depression, my father, I guess, realized very early on that you never knew how certain economic times would be. But the one thing you could always leave to your children was a good education, and that was portable. You could always have that, so that it was always understood. We were a large family, uncles and aunts and cousins. It was always understood that everybody in the family, girls, boys, everybody, were going to go to college, we're going to go on to graduate schools, especially mainly the boys. All of my cousins, as a matter of fact, male cousins on my father's side, all went to law school or to medical school. I mean, that was what you did. So it was not unusual for this to be in our family. And I noticed, thinking about this, I realized that most of my women cousins all married lawyers or doctors. I mean, that was sort of the way our family operated.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Anyway, I went to Penn, and one of the things I was looking at here when they asked about women teachers, even in college, I did not have women teachers. And in the Bridgeport school system, the only male teacher I had was for chemistry. Excuse me.
They're all women.
All women. Well, of course, we took biology. Boys and girls took them separately. You didn't take biology courses together in those days. Perish the thought you should, I guess you should know about reproduction with a man sitting, or boy sitting next to you. Anyway, from college, I went to Harvard Law School. And some of the things that, by the way, this was...
Did you apply to...
Yeah, well, this was 1953. This is before the women's movement, before my conscience hadn't been raised, nor anybody else's at that point. Excuse me, pardon me. You could apply to any law school you wanted to apply, and you had no application fees. My granddaughter now is talking about $50 and $60 for application fees. All it cost you was a 3-cent stamp. This is 1953. So I applied to a lot of law schools. And of course, you applied to places like Harvard because that would be fun. And Penn was automatic because if you went to Penn, you could go to Penn Law School. I guess be a Philadelphia lawyer. And I applied, I had some interesting experiences along that way. I applied to NYU, and one of my plans was, because when I graduated, I had been accepted into Bloomingdale's executive training program they took, and we got $65 a week. So on that, I could send myself to law school.
Yeah.
And my intention was to work at Bloomingdale's during the day and go to law school at night at NYU. That's really what I thought I would do, because they had a night school. I applied to several places, and one place I applied to was UConn. And when graduation came and we were packing up to take me home, my father came upon these acceptances and he saw Harvard and he went over the moon. He thought that was the be-all and end-all to him. Oh, yes, you're going to go. I mean, of course, it was going to cost like $1,200 a year, but we were going to find the money for that because it was Harvard. And no, I didn't have to go to NYU. And my cousin was called down by the dean at UConn. And they said to him, you know, your cousin applied here, because my name was blank. Your cousin applied here, and she has not answered that she's coming. And he said, no, she's going to go to Harvard. He said, well, why did she apply here? I mean, the idea was that you were taking a man's place, and so if you made the application and they were decent enough to take you in, how could you be so rude as to not accept this invitation? It was sort of, couldn't understand why you would apply then and think that, as I say, you took a man's place, and the truth was that guy had to go to the Army because we had we had the draft.
Yeah.
So, but at any rate.
But at Harvard, you were the first class?
No, fourth. I was the fourth class. There had already been one graduating class of women.
Okay.
And, but there were still people there who remembered the days of, and when Harvard had announced that they were going to take this vote of whether or not they would admit women. But they wouldn't announce the vote. They weren't going, but everyone said they knew they were going to admit women when they start building an enclosure around one of the men's room in Austin Hall. That was a clue that women were going to be admitted. And then Harvard said, because they were Harvard, and very arrogant, that they were not going to discriminate in any way. They'll take any qualified woman as well as any qualified man. So that in my class, we were 14 out of 539. They were not discriminating at all. But I will say in that same class, there were only 3 African Americans also, because they were non-discriminatory, you see. Mm-hmm. My tongue is in my cheek, you realize. Anyway, I did go to Harvard, and of course there were no facilities. No facilities. There was a dorm for men, but none for women. You had to find your own way. You could eat at the Commons because, I mean, anyone could eat there, you know.
Where'd you live?
Well, there were rooming houses, and we lived that's where we lived. My first semester of first year, I took a room in a rooming house because there were graduate students also.
Yeah.
And by the end of the first year, though, then I moved in with another gal in my class, and then 2 third-year students. They had an apartment, and I moved in with them.
Yeah.
The second year, I lived in an apartment, and with 2 other women students. We all became very close to each other.
You would.
We were well friends. I don't think you found among the women the kind of competition or cutthroated thing that you found with the men. I think we never quite felt, I think, we belonged, you know? And I don't know that they ever made us feel like we belonged. I just, not long ago, discussed this with a gal, Ruth, who I since has died, but that we were discriminated against, but fortunately, we didn't realize it. This was the 50s. This was before the civil rights movement, before the women's movement, so that we accepted a lot of the things, a lot of the discrimination. We accepted as that was the way it was. Women were supposed to graduate college and get married and have children, and we all wanted to get married and have children. I mean, we wanted to do all those things. And I think we sort of understood in a way that, I don't know if we understood, no. We didn't think we were, but we understood that they thought of us as second-class citizens. And they treated us as such, I think.
The men did?
No, not the fellow students, not my fellow students.
No, the teachers.
The professors, yeah. No, we had good friends among the men. Some guys hated us. The kind of like life. That was life. I did have some experiences. I had for Property 1 W. Barton Leach. You may remember perpetuities in a nutshell. We called him Leachy Nut. Anyway, he was very dignified. He was, very. I remember very tall, very sophisticated. He was also a general in the Air Force. And you always knew when you were going to be called on in his class. We always had assigned seats, by the way. In every class, you had to go to the seat. You were supposed to, you had your own seat with your name on it. Because they had seating plans, so they would know your name when they called on you. And he always called right in order, so you always knew you were going to be called on, and there was no reason to be unprepared. And if you were unprepared, you could just take off your head and put it next to I mean, he could be, well, he was sarcastic beyond words, Anyway, he called on me, and of course I had prepared, but there was one thin case, just one page, which, there was never a one-page case, right?
Right.
Believe it or not, that was a one-page case. And I had just flipped over it. And he called on me for the case, and I looked down, and I just imploded. I mean, I just went into my usual, forgive me, blah, blah, blah. I was just a wreck. And he looked at me and said, "Oh, Miss Blank," that was because I was a mayor, "Miss Blank, you make me feel like a heel." And then went to the fellow next to me and said, "Johnson, read the case." After that, the next case, he came back to me and said, "Are you up to briefing this case?" And I was prepared, and I did. And when he said that, you could hear all the guys go, "Oh," all the guys in the back. I mean, that he would have taken their heads off. And here he's saying, "Are you up to it?" And then for quite a while after that, at the cafeteria, I would have, "Miss Blank, are you up to passing the salt?" That sort of thing. The men just could. And I'm trying to, that class was also interesting because, it was interesting, but it was the days of the Army McCarthy hearings. And there were quite a few Harvard professors at the time who were advisors to Joe Welch. Joe Welch was the attorney for the Army. And so they would come to class on a Monday morning or on a next morning after a hearing, and we would always hash over what was going on, and they were also getting ideas to give to Welch.
Yeah.
So that, and we had a lot of that. We had a lot of that for like 2 or 3 weeks. We didn't do property, which was wonderful. We did the Army McCarthy hearings, In fact, here, I'm going to ramble, so I won't do that. I'll tell you later. I learned something very interesting about those hearings. But anyway, I remember also, of course, we dressed to go to class. We wore heels. And I was living over, we had in a boarding house. And there was a fellow next door, and he had a car. Of course, nobody had a car. Neil came from Signal Mountain, Tennessee, and he had a car. And so he would drive to give me a ride to class every morning, and that was wow. And he was always late. We were always late by maybe a minute or two, not by a lot. And after a few days, Professor Kaplan looking me straight in the eye and saying, "You men come in late every day now, and I'm not going to have it. You must be on time." And of course, we always, whenever you got a letter from the law school, it would be to Marcia Jane Blank Esquire, dear sir. But we accepted it. We thought it was funny. We never thought to complain. We just thought it was funny, But I say that was the 50s. I'm watching this TV thing, Mad Men, that takes place in the 60s, where women are just making their way into it. It never dawned on us that we were going to have a movement to do this. Trying to think of.
You said the bar exam, you went down.
Oh, well, that's a bar. But I was thinking of something else that happened at law school. Well, I can also, let me just go back 1 minute to say, when we say we had no facilities, we just found our own places. The one thing, of course, we all wanted to do was have some exercise, go to a gym, and I like to swim. In fact, I still swim a lot. And they had an interesting problem because you couldn't swim in the Harvard pool because it was only for men. And you couldn't swim over at Radcliffe because you were at Harvard. And that was it. You were the man without a country, or the woman without a country, I should say. But nobody would have gone out of their way in the administration to make anything possible for us. That wasn't. You were there because they were decent about taking you in, or you were there because you chose to be there, and so now that you chose it, well, you live with it. You made your bed, now live with it. As I say, we were second-class citizens there, but it wasn't just Harvard. Every other law school, I think, was sort of the same. We were not of the vintage that we were new on the scene. I mean, the women were practicing law all over the country then, and we were not at the time yet then when it was absolutely an acceptable thing. We were somewhere in a never land that you were different.
Radcliffe wasn't part of Harvard?
No, it was no, it wasn't. As a matter of fact, when I went to Penn, there were only limited schools I could go to, and I was in the college for women, and it was called coordinated education. We had all our classes together. Radcliffe didn't have all its classes with Harvard. I guess they did have some, but it wasn't totally Harvard, as Barnard in those days was not totally Columbia. In fact, I think it's still, I may not, but anyway.
But you got the degree from Radcliffe?
You got a degree from Radcliffe. You didn't get a degree from Harvard.
Oh, now you do, though.
Yeah. But no, in those days, you went to Smith. It was all women.
Yeah.
Even when you went, and you were more than 20 years younger than I am.
Yeah, it still is all women.
Oh, Smith never went co-ed? Oh, I didn't know that. Well, that's interesting. At any rate, there was nothing there that was specially for us. There was our class. Was one of the things about our class that was interesting was that we had lots of Korean War vets. In fact, there was the Korean War, I guess, was over in '53. There was a plane from Sewell that went directly to Boston to bring college students. There were vets who never went home. And we had several in our class, and of course all the schools around Boston had Korean War vets. And so they were older and they had seen a lot of more things that made them not quite so arrogant, I should say. Anyway, when we came time to take the bar, I had a cousin in my class at Harvard also. I have lots of cousins, as you guys know this, and all my cousins were lawyers. There's always a cousin someplace where I am. I had a cousin in my class, and so and there were a couple of other guys from Bridgeport who were not at law school with us. But, we're taking the bar, and we had, in those days, took a bar review course. I guess they still have that.
Yeah.
And we would drive back and forth to New Haven. You had to take it at New Haven. And we would drive back and forth to New Haven. Ivan had a car, my cousin. And I remember them all saying, if anyone flunked the bar, it had to be me, because they all had their induction notices already. Fortunately, we all made it. The day that in fact, you know how you worried about whether you passed the bar? Every morning you woke up and is this the day you'll hit the news? I went to Nantucket with some girlfriends, and the Andrea Doria sunk. And they were flying survivors into Nantucket, and that was the day I passed the bar. The only day I didn't think about it because I was so busy worrying about something else. That was the one day that they announced the bar. Speaking of the tests, we took the LSATs But I think they were very new in those days because I do not remember, there was certainly no prep courses for them. And I don't remember being concerned about it. Like it was going to be something that would be important. I remember it was Penn Dartmouth weekend, and I think half the guys were half in the bag, I'll tell you that, when they took the test. And I think we just took it because we were told at Penn that they advised it. I don't think they said, like, if you have to take it. And I'm not sure if the law school has required it. But I mean, that's sort of, that's how long ago this all was, you realize. Anyway, when I got out, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. There was always, I never had a worry in that I wouldn't find a place because there were always a cousin's practice to go into. Though I wasn't sure that's what I didn't think I wanted to practice. I always had loved history and government, and that's where my headset was. Someone, I guess one of my uncles or something, who was a lawyer, said to go see Cy Cohn, who at that time was the United States Attorney. And so I went to see him, and there were no openings, at least he said there were none, maybe he just didn't want me, I don't know. Anyway, there were no openings in the office at that moment. He wasn't advertising for it. I mean, by the way, and there wasn't the equal employment opportunities, or, no, I mean, they didn't have any of that. In fact, well, anyway, he'd go see Cy Cohn, which I did, and he didn't have an opening, but he knew Bob Wall, who was at the Legislative Commissioner's Office, which in those days was called the Legislative Research Office. And the reason for that was, this is an aside, John Bailey, who he was the Democratic chairman, was the legislative commissioner for the Democrats. There was always one for each. And they wanted him to resign, and he wouldn't do it. So what they did was they changed the name of the office from legislative commissioner to legislative research and created a whole new office to get rid of him.
Really?
That's what the story was. And so for a long while we were legislative research, and then when a real legislative research came into existence, we went back to be legislative commissioner. And that was I worked there from 1957 to 1959 when I got married. There was Ellen Burns, and there was, when I first came, a gal named Leah Marks. And I'm not sure if Leah and I didn't come exactly at the same time. And a woman named Ruth Yeomans, who was not a lawyer, but probably the best bill drafter the Connecticut legislature has ever seen, with the exception of you, my dear. But she was just super at the job. And Molly Toro was over in the Secretary of State's office, and I think there was one other gal with her, but I'm not sure. I don't think she was a lawyer, but she was a woman. And we were, I think, other than some of the secretaries, we were the only women in the state capitol at the time doing non-secretarial work. And we all were good friends, secretaries, and I don't mean to say that we weren't friends.
What did you do then?
We drafted.
I know, for what committees? All of them?
Yes, you came in, and there were only 4 of us. And the legislature was much larger in those days because it was before the Connecticut Constitutional Convention.
Yeah.
It was like 500 or more in the House. And what it really meant, that there were about 5 or 6 men who were running the show. And what it really meant, there was Bill Brennan, who was a Republican chairman from Fairfield County, and John Bailey, who was a Democratic state chairman, and they just made all the decisions between them. They got along beautifully. There was not this, you're a Republican, I'm a Democrat thing. It was a much nicer environment politically in those days. You didn't have, even when I went back to work in '74 there, when it wasn't so sharply divided, I think, as it is today.
No.
I mean, the committees in which I worked, everyone got along.
Yes.
If you were a Democrat and you had a good idea and I had a Republican chairman, it didn't make any difference. It didn't.
Some committees are more political than others.
Yeah. Well,
You know, like labor.
oh, really? Well, I don't know, I can't speak for them, but in those days, you just bill drafted, and you did it for, as I say, for whoever came in and asked for a bill. When the engrossed bills came down, or when the before engrossing, we all sat, we all proofread together, we all worked, the four of us worked together. Leah left to be, she became a city court judge in New York, and a gal named Marie Clower came. And we all left when we got married. I'm sorry, I cut you
No,
off.
they had big black typewriters then? Black
Yes.
typewriters? They
Oh,
didn't-
yes, of course we didn't have.
No computers, no.
No, of course not. And we wrote everything out by hand. Everything was so different. When I think of it now, everything was so different. They would drop the bills from the third floor down to the first so that, we could get them so we wouldn't have to run up and down the stairs. We would just give them with the atrium, sort of.
Yeah.
And we all were all good friends, though. I mean, I had, I can remember just, probably eating nightly at Molly Toro's house, though she was over at the Secretary of State's office. I remember my dates used to pick me up in Ellen's house for some reason. I'm not quite sure if I had a date in New Haven or something. I would stay with Ellen and Jim. So it was a close-knit group. And Maria and first Leah and I, then Maria and I. It
was fun.
Best buddy. Yeah, it was. Well, of course, it was fun anyway. I've always thought the state capitol was a fun place to begin with. But yes, it was fun, and of course, we had no trouble of being a woman there because everybody in that office was a woman, and I left when I got married. For one is, of course, I moved to Torrington, and was all Route 4, hilly roads coming in, 118 and Route 4, and bad weather. And I think it never dawned on me that I would work after I got married, if I didn't have to. I mean, if you had to, you had to. But when I look around at some of the gals in my class, and those who have had exciting careers, most of them have either divorced or never married. So I think in those days it was sort of harder. It's always been hard as far as
Doing both.
apportioning with the workload. But as far as it was harder in those days to keep the psychological part of the marriage together if you were out doing exciting things. I was fortunate. I married the right guy for me.
Yes.
He's a good guy. You know Jess.
Oh,
And
he's wonderful.
So that I would never have had that problem. But I know that I'm thinking of one case in particular, one of the gals in my class, who's now was a retired now, a federal judge, was terrible, the competition between them. He just couldn't accept the fact that she was doing as well as he was doing. Jess used to tease, he wanted me to support him. It never worked out, poor guy. But in my class, the gals that really sort of made it, did not, I think, have successful marriages. And I can remember going to seminars from time to time, mainly with Jess. And whenever there would be another woman there, I would naturally gravitate to her. And I would think 9 out of 10 times she was divorced. And I didn't really think about that until recently. But at any rate, so anyway, I went back to Torrington, and I always had something to do with Jess's office. Whether it was usually a will or an estate. And by the way, many of the gals in my class, or some of the who really ended up making a fair amount of money in life, we were all doing wills, estate, and tax work. The only woman I think that I know of, at least in Bridgeport, when I was growing up, who I think that I knew of as a lawyer, who I thought was, just super, was Margaret Connors, and she became Margaret Connors Driscoll, and she was, I think, the first woman on the juvenile court. In fact, she was so competent. I mean, I don't even know if I think she's still alive. I don't know. So competent, so super smart and everything. But when it came time for a judgeship, she was on the juvenile court. As Freddie Brenneman, the same thing. I mean, until this is before the court merger. This is when we had trial magistrates in the town and city courts. I remember we had a trial magistrate in Harwinton, and I think they did things like speeding, or I'm not quite sure. And I know Jess and I had a case in front of him. And of course, being we're young, we're new. I mean, I probably wrote a 20-page brief or something. And he looked at this and said, "Don't try to get smart with me." This was before, I guess the courts merged in 69. The circuit court started in 69. I was, for a while, I was petitioner's representative, which was once a month you went to court. It was common pleas. And you represented all these women who had husbands who were not supporting. It was a Uniform Enforcement Support Act, and all these guys had fled the jurisdiction, and the deadbeat dads.
Yeah.
And you were always you were chasing them all over through this
Even
Uniform
then.
Act. Even yes, even then, things haven't really changed.
It's gotten worse.
And I remember one of the women in my class. I think of us as girls, even though we're probably half of us are dead and we're all in our 70s and 80s. But nonetheless, married one of the fellows in the class, and their divorce ended in the fact that he was beating her. And I remember everyone saying, "A Harvard law student beat his wife." But even then, these things knew no class lines, no educational lines. All the things that we now have become sort of aware of and are working, had it not been for Oprah or something.
Yeah.
But we didn't have an Oprah in those days. We just about barely had television, I think, yes, with rabbit ears. The things we were not aware of, that these things have always been going on, always been going on. I can remember there was one woman who came in, she had such a hard time. And Helen Bielek was our administrative assistant. She did all the work. I just took one. And she came in and she used to call her Mrs. Bielek. And anyway, she came in and would cry on her shoulder about she had no money and she was raising kids. So I remember calling my counterpart in Broward County, Florida, and saying, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I didn't marry the bum in the first place. I'm doing what I can." So I had my eye opener to that. But anyway, I did that. There was always something I had. I didn't have regular hours. I wasn't working, basically speaking. But I always had a brief to write or a little something to do, that I was never totally out of it or without a little bit of pressure. But then I wasn't really ever back into it. And then and I'm not quite sure how this came about, but it was Molly Toro who called me, and I'm not sure if I bumped into her. I've been racking my brains to remember whether I called her or what. But anyway, she called saying that there was an opening in the Secretary of State's office. She had gone on the bench and come off.
Yes.
Yeah. And there was an opening in the Secretary of State's office, and would I come and work with her? Well, she was going to be my boss. I loved Molly. And at the same, when Ellen, and I guess maybe I said I'll come over and see her. I'm not sure what I said. But when Ellen heard about this, now Ellen had gone on the bench at this point, and Norma was now director of our office. And I say our office because for those, Sharon and I worked together with the Legislative Commissioner's office. But Ellen called and said she and Molly were still friends, and that there was an opening in the Legislative Commissioner's office, and would I take an interview there? And so I preferred that because.
Who did you interview with?
I interviewed with Art Lewis, remember?
Yeah.
And Sam Friedman, but Sam wasn't the Legislative Commissioner at that point. He was still a legislator. He was going to be the next term. He was already appointed to the job, but because he was a legislator, he couldn't be. And I couldn't.
I was interviewed by Art Lewis and Harry Mazadorian.
Oh no,
He left, and Sam took his place.
Harry was still there when I came. So, but Sam, I know Sam was in the interview because I had known Sam from Bridgeport.
Yeah.
I'm sure he was there, but maybe there were more, and maybe I remember so little about all of this because I had been now almost 20 years. This was 1974. I graduated in 56. Didn't go to work till 57.
Yeah, but your kids.
Oh, I had kids. I had 3 kids.
3 daughters.
And always very involved in community things. And the truth of the matter is, when you are not working, you are working a lot harder in many ways because your days.
What were you involved with in the community?
Oh, I was involved with the league. I was involved with community. Oh gosh, what was I'm trying to think of the name of it. But they do community service. It was a community organization in Torrington. For a while, I was even working for Catholic Charities, so I'm Jewish. I mean, not work. I mean, on the board. We're on the board of the Junior Republic. Which was in Litchfield. I did a lot of that kind of things, and of course, school. We had one of the interesting things I've ever done in my life. As a matter of fact, this has to now be in the 60s. We decided to bus something like 20 students from Waterbury to Litchfield. Litchfield was it was a wonderful place to raise children, wonderful. A very pristine community. But very broad-minded. I mean, this was, you would think not, but it was, they used to call us lily white liberals, But we were. And so we worked on this. There were some federal funds. We worked on this for like a year and a half to get the federal funds, to get it arranged. And they did. They bused 20 kids in from Waterbury. Every child had a family that was attached to it. And I had some interesting experiences over this, and it was wonderful. After a while, they shut off federal funds, and they shut off the program. Everyone said, well, it didn't work. Untrue. When I went to work as a prosecutor at Waterbury, I had two experiences. And one was a very sweet young girl was raped. She was almost raped. I mean, she fought him off to the tune of a broken arm. And I was trying the case, or I had the case. And the father came in, and he said, "You don't remember me." And sure enough, I had been the attached family to the older daughters. And he was very upset about this young girl, not just because of what had happened to her, but the older daughters, both of them, coming from poor African-American families in Waterbury, had both gone to college. The younger daughter, having gone through the Waterbury public school system, and was a sweet little girl, was not being encouraged to do it. Now, the other two had gone through on scholarships, and I mean, there was no money there. But it was the kind of encouragement that you got when you went to the kind of school that my kids were lucky enough to go to, you know? The other one I had was our defendant was I wouldn't say he was a bum, but if you went into the dictionary and looked for the definition, there was his picture. And believe it or not, he was married to one of the kids who had been in Litchfield. And she came in one day to talk to me about Freddie. And she said to me, "Here again, you don't remember me." And I did, as a matter of fact. And she said, "You know what my dream is?" And I said, "No, what?" She said, "I have to get a job, and I want to move to Litchfield because I want my kids to go to Litchfield public schools." And it really made me feel as if, what a shame those kind of programs just stopped dead. Because not one of the kids, she was the only one who was married to one, but not one of those kids in that program ever appeared in the Waterbury criminal courts. Not one. And they all had this horrible kind of environment in which they were pushing uphill against. And I will say that they all came from really decent families, and we had asked the Waterbury schools at the time to send us 20 kids, and for whatever reason they didn't. And like 3 nights before school began, a couple of the people on the committee, I was not one, went down knocking on doors in Waterbury looking for first graders who would come to Litchfield. And then it went on for about 5 or 6 years. That was, I think, the best project I ever worked, that I consider ever worked. But I did a lot of things with the league and with PTA. You did all the things that you do as parents.
Yep. And so after you worked for LCO,
Yeah.
the Legislative Commission's Office, you were from 74 to 78, right?
Yeah, well, that's when I went back from 74 to 78. And when I went back, of course, when I went there in 57, Ellen and Ruth were, they were, by the way, they were super.
Yeah.
I can't say it out loud. I think we've never had such wonderful directors. But anyway,
Yeah.
Ellen and Ruth were the directors. And I was the young, Leah and I, or Marie and I, we were the young ones on. When I went back, everybody in that office was like 20 years younger than I. And I remember being so nervous because I had been away from it. They were all young and fresh and pretty and skinny and all the kind of things that, that I envied. It took me, I think, into the first session before I really felt comfortable. And then I felt very comfortable. And I really thought it was fun. It was it was a lot of hard work. It was very long hours. And if I had one regret about any of that, in fact, about most of anything of my whole life, it was hard keeping my friendships with people because you worked long hours, you came home, and whatever little time you had, you devoted to family. I did very little community work after that. Very little. I mean, I
didn't have time.
Well, I didn't have the time.
No.
What I ever did probably was like PTA or something with the kids in
Yeah.
school. My girls were athletes. I remember for a year there, when I went to work, I thought I didn't want them coming home from school at 3:30 if I wasn't there. So I sent them to St. Margaret's McTurnan because the bus didn't come back until 5, and at least Jess would be home by then. And I remember one day they had to go someplace, and it was very cold. And they called me and said, "We don't have a ride." They had forgotten, or I hadn't arranged for something. And I said, "Well, go down the street and ask one of their friends' mothers," because I knew the friend would be going and mother would be. And it was freezing cold. And the mother sent them home saying, "Let your ditzy mother take care of you. If she wants to work, that's her business, but I'm not going to be doing her carpooling." And I realized then, and it was awful. It was so cold that they had to walk like two Litchfield, North and South Street. We lived on North. She lived at the end of South. I don't know if they're huge blocks.
Yeah,
I mean, they're not blocks. They're.
Yeah.
And I sort of realized then that this was now in the 70s, and women were becoming conscious of the fact they were not working, and all the things that were going on. That there was starting to be an irritant among those who stay-at-home moms were being irritated with the working moms, and the working moms were being overburdened, sort of, or we were just being snowed under.
Right.
Because we had not, that was not the way we had lived our lives for the last 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I was standing in the back of the judiciary. I was, I did the legal services. What were we called? Legal representative? Wasn't it? We had a name. Help me. We were legal representatives?
Yeah.
I was legal.
Bill drafters or
Well, no, I
legal
wasn't, but
services.
no, I had a name tag
Oh, you
that said
did?
Marcia Blanksmith. Because when I had worked there in 57, I was unmarried.
Yeah.
Norma, our director, decided that I should be Marcia Blanksmith because if anyone knew me, they
Yeah.
would still know me by my maiden name.
Right.
And I think it was white and it had red print. And I think it was called legal representative. It was judiciary.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. We had, the first year I was up there.
Those hearings take forever.
Well, not just about the conversation at the table.
Oh, yeah.
We had really, the men, there were no women on the committee, I think.
Really?
I'm trying to think. I don't remember any active women on the committee. Yes, there were no women who really participated in the discussions, as I can recall.
Really?
Betty Brewer was the secretary, the greatest gal you ever met, right?
I know, yeah.
And Mickey,
I can't.
You remember Mickey?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know who Mickey was. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
and a kid from Cornwall. At any rate, I mean, here I'm digressing, which I tend to do, but at any rate, when they were bright. The guys were so bright. And so I had such a good feeling about government. This was what I thought government should be. Not only did they all get along, Jim Bingham was the chairman, and I forget who they were Republicans my first year. It was Republicans.
George Guidera?
George,
Guidera.
that's who. Yeah, they
Yeah.
were the chairman.
He
And then-
became commissioner.
Did he really?
Yes, he
Oh,
did.
I'm good. He was a good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then after that, Neiditz, what was his first name?
Dave.
Dave Neiditz, and I should know that because he was at law school with me. He was ahead of me at law school. And I forget who the House chairman was. Oh, Jim Healy. They got along super. And then Dave died, and Jim Healy, I think, became a judge.
Ernie Abate.
Ernie Abate, but he was my last chairman, so to
Yeah.
say.
And Sal.
And Sal DiPiano. I mean, those are two guys you just could love. I mean, you could just love that. And they were bright, and they were concerned, and they were sincere. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I guess, at any rate, I was standing in the back of the court of the judiciary room, and remember Judge Lexton came up to me, and it was one of those crazy. There was often crazy days, and we'd have these, really in-depth kind of conversation. People would explode all over the place, but over issues, never over politics. And he came back, and I was talking with Betty Brewer, and he said to me, "How can you stand this? Wouldn't you like to do something different or something?" And I don't know why. I never know why I say half the things I say anyway. But I said something about, well, only if I could work closer to home. And that was a problem, by the way, because we had many snowy winters, and I was driving back to Litchfield, and it was all over.
Roberts Litchfield.
Oh, it was, but more than the fact that it was far, because there were people going to Stamford and stuff, but it was all over hills. I mean, I had Route 118 that I was going, and that last East Hill into Litchfield, you were lucky if you made on an icy night. And at that time, Betsy Ferger was working at the research, and she was doing research, I don't think not for judiciary, but for some other committee I had. And we became fast friends. And occasionally I would stay with her and Bob, or I'd stay overnight. If I was really late when I left the commissioner's office, I would go down to the Statler Hotel, I guess it was. The Stater Hotel, because I couldn't drive back at night. I just knew I would never make it back on a bad night. So I said to him if I could work closer to home. And the very next day, Jim Healy called me, who was, I think, already a judge. I guess he had to be, of course, and said there was going to be an opening in the Waterbury prosecutor's office in the GA. Would I like it? And I don't know whether, I know I never said no, but I don't ever remember saying yes. And I just didn't pay attention. And Claudia and I went off to Spain and Morocco for a little vacation. And when I came back, Jim Healy called and said, "You're back." He said, they've been waiting for you, that space. And I was back in the legislative commissioner's office. You've got to go over tomorrow. I mean, they just need somebody. And that's I couldn't say no at that point. I just couldn't. And I guess I never really realized I was going to do this. And so, as many things in my life, they're just unplanned and just
They happen.
My granddaughter just gave me a necklace, which was a fortune cookie. And the fortune says, "Life is what happens when you're making plans." So I don't plan because my life just happens. And so then I went over and where I stayed until my retirement in the
So we're
Waterbury
there from
prosecutor's
78
office.
to
78 to 94. One thing I meant to say before, the thing that happened because I was a woman that wouldn't. At one point, the Connecticut Bar Association had a date where if you went, you could get sworn into the United States Supreme Court. And you went to the, you went by yourself, but then you would go in as a group. And I forget, there maybe were 30 in the group. And Tom Meskel was a congressman from Connecticut, from my district, 6th district at the time. In fact, we don't even have a 6th district anymore. But anyway, he was my anyway. But he was the one that was going to introduce us to the court, and then we'd get sworn in. And the group probably got divided into 2 groups. And as a matter of fact, my law school roommate, Nancy Howes Gormley, had a daughter, and I had the 3 girls, and we thought, well, what a treat for the girls. And so we went to Jess too, and we all went down for a weekend in Washington, which we did weekend thing. We got up. She was we went alphabetically. I was Smith. She was Gormley. We went alphabetically. She was in the first group, and then we came up in the second group. And Earl Warren, who was absolutely my hero, we'll never have another Chief Justice like Earl Warren. I mean, he was the same kind of flaming liberal and a Republican. That was I. He swore us in. And of course, I was the only woman in the group. And so when he looked down the list, the only one name he could recognize, of course, was me. And so he turned and said, "Oh, Mrs. Smith, I'm so happy you could come." And I felt so. And of course, obviously, he didn't know me. But it was because I was the only woman in the group. Nancy was the only woman in her group. I suspect today it would be a 50-50, but we were the only 2. Anyway, I went to work then as a prosecutor. First day, I can say it now because they have all died, but I worked with 3 guys who were total drunks. They've all died. Anyway, the first day I arrived there, with my heart in my mouth, like, what have I done? What have I done? Arthur stopped me. The other 2 had not shown up for whatever reason, were not there. I think they resented. They had a woman there. Mary Galvin, as a matter of fact, I think she was the first to be in the state's attorney's office, but I may be incorrect, the first woman. She became state's attorney over in Talon County at one point, or New Haven, I forget exactly where. Yeah. Great gal. But at any rate, she had been there before me and then moved on to a different, she didn't live there in that area, so she moved closer to wherever she lived. And then I came. I didn't take her place over. I had taken the place of a man who had gotten sick. Anyway, when I arrived, the very first day, I didn't know where the front door was. Arthur said to me, "Hi, I'm Arthur. We have 2 choices." We did pre-trial downstairs. This is before the new courthouse. Pre-trial downstairs and pre-trial and trial upstairs. And I was assigned to pre-trial. The person whose place I took was pre-trial. And I think the guys downstairs for some reason it was, I don't know the reason. I will never know the reason why it was considered a better job to have than doing the docket. But anyway, it was, and the fact that I was new and I was not going to be doing the docket. Arthur stopped me and said, "You have your choice. You do the docket or I have a trial going. There's a trial to do." Well, I don't think I knew what the docket was. So I decided, okay, I'll do a trial. A disaster it was. But I got my way through the trial, and this was this poor woman who was really, she wasn't a criminal, she was a nuisance. And it was my first introduction and my understanding of the fact that the criminal justice system is the recipient of all of society's failures. That when we don't know what else to do with it, I mean, yes, there are the criminals, but also there's a whole school of them out there. When you don't know what else to do with them, you arrest them. Only for lack of a better place. And so anyway, I I was trying to think of all my interesting experiences. And one of the was that I decided I better do something quick to learn how to try cases. I did have one semester of trial in the law school, but that was, and here again, we had, moot court, of course, was always appellate work. So writing briefs was easy, and arguing appellate, and I did argue some cases prior to my going to work for Jess's law firm. That's the kind of thing I would do. But at any rate, I decided I'd better learn how to try a case. And so the Connecticut Bar Association gave seminars, and one was how to voir dire. And fortunately, I had worked for the Judiciary Committee, so I knew what these terms were. And I only knew these terms because I had worked for that committee, and I knew the statutes cold. I mean, nobody knew the criminal statutes better than I, right? We wrote them.
Yeah, right.
And so I went to this kind of voir dire, and we each took a turn going around. And after I got through, then we'd all criticize each other, sort of. Or someone said, "You never mentioned the fact you were a woman." And I didn't really think that would be necessary. And everyone said, "Well, you know, there are going to be many jurors who are not going to want you in that courtroom." And it was sort of, it was something that this is 1978. But there were still not tons of women in the courtroom then. But it was of course getting to be more so. But I would turn to jurors and say, "Do you know, mind the fact?" And I can remember one very young man saying to me, "Yeah, you remind you're fine. You remind me of my grandmother." And I thought, "Oh, I'm not a sex kitten." But anyway, and then I think you want me to wind up.
No, I think we have to take a short break.
Oh, okay. Short time for a break?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Are you ready? Yeah, let me know while I'm set up. 15 seconds? 10 seconds?
We're back from our break. So, Marcia, what about the prosecutor's office?
Well, in the prosecutor's office, I mostly did trial work. I mean, well, that's what prosecutors do.
Yeah.
But of the three, when I was in Part B, the three guys there never wanted to try a case. They just never did. And that was okay for me. I mean, that was okay for me. It was hard work, but anyway, it was interesting. And so I did get lots of trial work. And I have,
Experience.
experience. And as any trial lawyer, I don't think of myself as a trial lawyer, but as a trial lawyer, you all have a million more stories. You really do. But I don't know that my stories are any different being a woman than it would have been if I were a man. You know, the question you ask is a joke. I'll never forget, I forget even what the case was, but the father was the alibi for the son. The father was a politician, and somebody before I went in said, "Oh, you know, he's on the city, whatever, on the city council, I guess." Whatever he was. And it happened that the crime was alleged to have been committed on Election Day, and the father that he was with the kid, and the kid couldn't have done what they said he did. And so I just jokingly said to the father, "Oh, an old pal like you wasn't down at the polls on Election Day?" He laughed back. It was a joke. The jury came in with a guilty because they said he would have been down at the polls on Election Day. You never know. You plan all these wonderful kind of arguments you're going to make, and it's a snide remark, or it's whatever. I mean, the thing that you don't think is at all meaningful, the jury will come back, and that is what they hang their hat on. You never know where they are going or what they are thinking. And it's sort of one of the problems, and I think the more legal work we do, the further we get away from what the average guy out on the street is thinking about a legal question. Anyway, after there was, I can't remember her name, they had a woman over in Part A at the time. I don't think she tried cases, so I can't remember. And then there was another one who I always thought was a walking encyclopedia of knowledge. And she didn't try cases because she never wanted to. I mean, she would go into the courtroom as a clerk, but she didn't even want to know the numbers of the courtroom. But she was just brilliant about law. And then when John Connolly became state's attorney, Frank McDonald went on the bench, and John Connolly became state's attorney. He hired mostly all women. And when I went to work in the legislative commissioner's office back in the 70s, you were all 20 years younger than I. Now everyone was 30 years younger than I, but also a great group of gals.
Well, before that, they were all men?
Yeah. That time, I think there was Ann Dranginis was up in Litchfield County. Mary Galvin was, I'm not sure whether she was in New Haven or where. There may have been a gal in Talon County and a woman named B something over in Hartford. I think that was it in those days. This is now we're in the late 70s. By let me see, I guess the early 80s or so, then the law schools start filling up with women. Government start taking in women. Equal opportunities employment was in effect. The civil rights movement had come. The women's movement had come. The economy had. When I went to work at the legislative commissioner's office, I went to work for $11,500. I got really good money, maybe, and good health insurance. One thing I would say. When I went to work in 1957, it was $5,700 that we made, and with that, I even was able to buy a car for $1,500. You know, everything had changed. Everything had changed, and then I have some dear and good friends who are the ages of my daughter. In fact, many are younger than my daughters, who I worked with in the state's attorney's office. I worked in Part B and then in Part A. And then after that, and then I went back to Part B to be a supervisor because I was about to retire anyway. And I will say that I look back on it all now. It was fun. A lot of it was hard work. A lot of it was pressure. I never walked into a courtroom that I didn't have a knot in my stomach to voir dire my first juror or to do my summation. And I always thought my summations were pretty good. I mean, I worked hard on them until one Supreme Court decision, which they took on one of the grounds for appeal was something I had said in my summation about reasonable doubt. And the Supreme Court said, no, it was not. It may have been inartful, they said. And I thought, oh, I didn't think it was inartful. I thought it was so clever. I mean, I worked on these things. But at any rate, speaking of the Supreme Court, I must tell you, I did as a prosecutor, before they had the appellate session at the state's attorney's office, we did our own appeals.
Really?
Yeah. We did them for maybe the first 2 or 3 years that I was there. Or maybe even more, I don't know. But anyway, we did our own appeals. But even when I was working with Jess and his brother had a law firm in Torrington, and I did some arguments. There was no ladies' room in the Connecticut Supreme Court. They had the only bathroom there, had a urinal and an enclosure. And you had to go downstairs like into the dungeon practically and down a long hall. And it was for the staff, and that was the one you could use. And I can remember, I was there for maybe more than once, saying, "Oh, nuts to this," I was.
Yeah.
And I went in, and I forgot to lock the door, and a guy came in to use the other facility, and after that, I walked downstairs and down the hall. But they, as a matter of fact, I think, was Justice Peters the first woman on the Supreme Court? Now, that was back in the 80s.
Yes.
The United States Supreme Court didn't have women until Sandra Day O'Connor. I can remember Felix, I'll tell you how old I am. Felix Frankfurter came to speak at the school. And I remember that we had a Q&A, and someone asked him how he felt. I don't know if he's, you know what, I don't know if I read this or I was or whether he was still on the court. But someone said to him, do you think there should ever be a woman on the court? And he said, well, someday we will have a woman and a Negro. In those days, well, that was how long ago it was. That was, and sort of, that was sort of what it was then. That was back in the 50s, of course. And so I retired, and now I have 7 grandchildren who keep me very busy, and though they don't live that close. And my 3 daughters. One of my daughters doesn't work, and I think it's maybe because I came home tired so much of the time, but she's working a lot. A stay-at-home mom, I think, almost works a lot harder than a woman who works. And the reason for this is that the job isn't as organized. I mean, when you had a job, you knew you had X cases to do or whatever you're doing. And she is, I mean, you do the carpooling, but it's after hours or whatever. And often, and I see with her, she lives in New Jersey in a commuter town to New York City. And these gals that work in New York rely on her to drag their kids around because she's taking hers anyway, and I guess if you're taking yours anyway. But it's a lot harder. You're in many pieces. You're doing a lot of volunteer work, which my daughters do, and but it's not it's not as organized, and there's no paycheck at the end.
No, there isn't.
Anyway, as I say, I don't think that many things in my career.
Rewards
My rewards?
in your career?
My rewards. I guess now that it's all over, and I really enjoy being retired, I would say that it was sometimes fun. Especially, I think, working in the Legislative Commissioner's office, I found fun. It was never dull. Whatever it was never dull. I had, I'd like to say this. I appeared between 1978 and 1994, I appeared before many judges. And by that time, there were women judges. I had some wonderful judges, some men who were just wonderful men. But some who were really arrogant and nasty, made the courtroom tense. I never found that so of any woman judge that I appeared before. I never found one of them, at least in my experience, not one was arrogant, not one tried to make tension in the courtroom. I think that there's something in our DNA that makes us more want to get the job done and not showboat. I never thought there was now, and of course there's so many more. A lot of my 30-year-olds are now judges, as a matter of fact, but they're not showboaters.
No.
That had been my experience.
If you did all over again, would you be a lawyer?
Yes, but there's also now there's also other things I would like to do as well. I think that because we are all living longer now, God be willing, we should take portions of our lives and do different things. I think I'd like to have at some point been a computer programmer, but we didn't have computers in my day, so that wasn't on the I think I would have liked to take some part as a journalist. In high school, I had been active on the school paper. Even at Penn, I wrote occasionally for the Gazette. I'm sorry that I didn't pursue some of that more. Today, I think people are able to parse out their lives more. In my day, you went to college, you went right to law school if you didn't have to go to the Army. You didn't have gap years. That term didn't exist. You didn't have gap years.
Kids do now.
Yeah, well, my granddaughter's telling, I'm going crazy, and she's telling me, oh, Nana, I don't want to go to college right now, you know. And the truth of the matter is, if you're going to live to be 90, you have time.
That's true.
Yeah.
What in your life can you look back and what accomplishment are you proudest of? Your kids.
I guess I was just
And
going to
your-
say
and
that.
your husband and your kids.
I guess we've had a pretty decent family.
Yeah.
I can't take responsibility for it, though. I don't think I was particularly that good of mother, and through some nice quirk of fate, my girls really turned out to be nice women. They really are. We have very close family relationships, and I see among other people women who don't get along with their children. I know this woman in Florida, just was in her 80s, and she doesn't talk to her daughter. And it seems to me, if I were in my 80s, no matter what, this is a time to make amends. You haven't got forever, you know? And so I would say my greatest accomplishment is my 3 daughters, my 3 sons-in-law, my 7 grandchildren.
And your husband?
Oh, of course, Jess.
Jess,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah. That was probably the really good decision I made in my life.
No, you made other
yeah,
good ones.
but that was my best decision.
Yes.
It was. Yeah.
No question.
Yeah, that and my Prius. I guess that sums up my career. I don't ever consider myself. Back in the 70s, there was 25 years of women at Harvard, and we all went back for this. It was wonderful. There were all the girls were out of young girls, or all the first graduating class there was 25 years out. And I remember saying, I wasn't a pioneer. And one of the little kids, they were women, said to me, but you cut down a few trees. And I guess that was it.
Well, that concludes our interview then.
Good to see you again, Sharon.
Good to
That's
see-
part of the interview, was getting to see you again.